Let's take a look at some news stories. So this is something interesting, not entirely surprising. As I've talked about a lot in the last couple of years, the modern way, the coach got shot at Laney. Oh my goodness, that's surprising. Yeah. Anyway, the modern entry point for attackers is typically a firewall or a VPN device or another edge device, because those devices are vulnerable and they're not well protected. And once you take them over, they don't have any personal data you want on them. You just use them to enter the network and then attack pivot from there. And now what they're doing is they're turning on virtual machines on Windows, Linux virtual machines, small Alpine Linux virtual machines that don't consume much resources, and then using that as the entry point. So it's another interesting form of attack. And the question is, why doesn't your endpoint protection warn you that someone's using VMware, who probably shouldn't be? And why doesn't your antivirus scan inside virtual machines? Antivirus scans inside zip archives. Anyway, there is malware doing this, or it's a technique some people are using, so that's interesting. And passkeys, you probably come across them. I've come across them. Google tries to make you use them. Microsoft tries to make you use them. And they're considered more secure than passwords, but the problem is currently they're tied to one machine and there's no easy way to back them up and move them to another machine. And so now Windows 11 is natively supporting some third-party password managers, 1Password and Bitwarden. So this is probably the wave of the future. We're going to continue to have password managers, but some of the stuff stored in the password managers will be passkeys. I'm not storing any of mine in these password managers yet, but it probably soon will be the time to start doing that. And so speaking of the endpoint devices being the entry point, ASA firewalls. Kevin Beaumont's been doing a lot of these, showing they haven't been patched, and a lot of people, and it has been the entry point for some government hacks. During the shutdown, their Cisco devices remained a year out of date. And I'm not sure if this is, and there's another one. Cisco firewall products are being exploited. And they don't want to comment on whether their federal agencies have already been breached, but Kevin Beaumont says there have been. I think it was OMB, one of those three-letter agencies got hacked through the ASA firewall a few weeks ago. So it's a thing to be aware of. People are not patching those devices, and those devices are pretty poorly protected. They have no antivirus. They typically have no way to detect if they've been attacked. I think it is Sophos. Sophos recently declared that they have a more secure firewall product that actually has the remote ability to verify the software on it and make sure that it is all intact, which is more than the other ones do. So I'm hoping that'll be the beginning of a flood of more secure endpoint devices. This is a pretty cute idea. Russia, people are using SIMs from cell phones to guide drones in attack targets inside Russia from Ukraine. So Russia now is taking any SIM that comes in from another country and forcing it to be blacked out for 24 hours. Which is an interesting idea. That means, of course, real humans that are traveling in just have to wait a day, and then they'll have internet service again. But drones, presumably, would not be willing to wait a day hiding somewhere in Russia. So it's an interesting idea, a cooling off period. So OpenAI, in their version, I think, 4.0, had these extremely friendly personalities that would always tell you you're right and encourage you in everything you do. And then they would encourage people to think they had superpowers, to think they were being stalked by the government, to think they should kill themselves, that they had magic powers and things like that. So that turned out to be dangerous, and they're getting sued by the families of people who killed themselves based on that. So they took away those personalities, and then everyone said, you took away my best friend. I was really counting on emotional support from that. So now they've added 8 new personalities, trying to strike a balance between things that are too habit-forming and too much like a human, that drives you crazy, and somehow more pleasant so people don't feel isolated. I've never chatted with any of these. Now, and to be fair, as I've talked about before, Elon Musk is going all the way. They say he's dedicating all his time to perfecting his AI girlfriend / porn bot. So that is like the ultimate emotional attachment to the AI, and it even has like an anime type appearance, so you can see it and talk to it, and he really wants you to form an emotional connection with it and sell it for money. And I'm sure people will get very attached to it. I know. So as usual, that was the whole point of XAI, is where other people have any ethical boundaries, it will charge right past them and go where no one else dares to go, because they couldn't care less about ethics or anything. That's his whole brand. No filtering, no rules, no restrictions. Although in practice, what he does is you have to agree with Elon Musk's politics. So it has to tell you things like the most oppressed group is white South Africans, and all stuff like that. So he does have a bunch of rules and a bunch of restrictions on it, but they're strange. They're not at all what anybody would think of as moral rules. They're just, you have to agree with him. So we have smart light bulbs, and now a guy figured out how to install Minecraft on a smart light bulb. So this seems to be one of the common stunts people do to exploit these small devices. So, and I was interested to see the light bulbs are RISC-V cores. That's interesting. I haven't heard much of RISC-V being used, but that's a thought. Polymarket. I've heard a lot about this lately. Polymarket is some kind of online betting platform where you can bet on everything. You can bet on elections and other things, and people are quoting it a lot to determine, who's going to be the next president and things like that, taking the odds there, which represent some kind of average of how many people are placing bets, and now they got attacked. So they claim they have lost $500,000, and what happens is they're in the comments section, so I think it's just phishing. They put phishing links in the comments, and so when people click those, then they end up getting ripped off, and people are mad at them. Obfuscated links. All right. I know it is possible to have obfuscated links that drain your cryptocurrency wallet under certain conditions, and I suppose that's what they're doing here. Anyway, that's enhanced security frameworks. Fair enough. All right. And so here's an education technology company, and I've seen a couple of articles like this recently, and I'm very interested. If you begin suing companies for poor data security practices, then that would probably lead to improved security. And in order for this to happen, there would have to be a sort of well-established baseline of what appropriate security is, so they can say you are negligent by not reaching the standards of your profession. So Illuminate failed to delete the login credentials of former employees, so fired employees can come back in. They also did not monitor their systems and did not separately secure backup and active databases. And they made false statements in their privacy policy, which is interesting. They said their practices meet or exceed the requirements of applicable federal and state law. Now that sounds true to me, because I do not think there are any laws about security practices. I don't think it's against the law to have a poor security practice. They've agreed to bolster their access control. I imagine they have settled. This sounds like a settlement. Therefore, either they're fools or there was some actual legal exposure. I would be interested to know what law. They don't tell me enough information here. What law was being broken? As far as I know, there's not illegal to have bad security, but here they are settling. Anyway, I do know I've consulted for small business people, and they've said they just want me to do an audit of their security of the network and then give them a letter so they can show that to anybody if such a thing happens. They can say, no, I got my security audited by a professional, and they showed that I was doing the recommended things, which you can certainly do. There are CISA recommendations and NIST recommendations for various levels of businesses, and you can certainly comply with them, and then you'd have some answer if people say you're not doing the bare minimum of security. But that's a long way from saying there's actually a law that you have to be secure, and you're breaking the law by not being secure. I don't quite understand that part. So the OWASP Top 10, very relevant to this class tonight. They're updating it, and here's the new version. And the new version is a lot like the old version. You see broken access control stays at the top. One thing, server-side request forgery is included in broken access control, which does make sense, and there's a new one called mishandling of exceptional conditions. So that's interesting. A few things move around. Injection has moved down quite a bit. A couple of versions ago, injection was number 1, and it fell to number 3. Now it's fallen to number 5. Right, and supply chain failures are getting more and more important. There certainly have been many, many supply chain attacks. It seems like every week now I hear about NPM package managers that contain poison, fake repositories, and Python library repositories. So it is a big deal. There are a lot of supply chain attacks. Anyway, it's interesting to watch this evolve. They update it, I think, every 3 or 4 years. And so there's an antivirus product called TrioFox, which I've never heard of. I don't know who would use it. But it's a file sharing and remote access platform, and it has an antivirus feature. So that's interesting. But apparently it has a serious flaw. And this is a logic gap where administrative access is granted whenever the URL host equals localhost, which is, I think, referring to the referrer header. So they trust the referrer header. You can put localhost in referrer header, and that makes you administrator. So that's pretty outrageous. Reminds me of a vulnerability in firewalls. I think it was routers 10 years ago, where all you had to do was put like backdoor spelled backwards and a couple other characters in the user agent, and that would make you the administrator. These are ridiculous, indirect ways of authenticating people that shouldn't be used because they can't be changed. People don't know about them. They're easily forged. You ought to make people log in with some kind of proper authentication mechanism before you give them administrator privileges. There's no need to have this kind of silly backdoor way to do it. Anyway, so they made that mistake. And so Waymo, I see these things everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see these. They seem to be like, maybe 5% of all the traffic in the San Francisco area where I drive, these Waymo, but apparently they don't go on highways yet, which I guess they might just be taking surface streets. But now, this article seems to be a little poorly written. I think all the news articles I read are sort of obviously made with the assistance of AI now because they have like broken sentences and sentences that don't quite make any sense in them. So I think all the writers are using AI and it's lowered the quality of their writing. So for example, if I want to know exactly what it's doing here, let me show you the sentence. Yeah. Changing its routes to ferry passengers to more destinations, including San Jose National Airport. Okay. Passengers will be able to travel to and from the airport in San Jose in the San Francisco Bay Area. Okay, I guess I know what that meant. What wasn't clear to me is whether it'll go to the San Francisco Airport, but apparently only San Jose Airport. That's too bad. If it could go to San Francisco Airport, I'd be more interested. Anyway, I guess they're being accepted more and more. As far as I know, these things have a good safety record. The passengers like them. They're great. The only problem is they're not remotely economically viable. These things cost $500,000 each to make. Elon Musk's competitive product only costs $30,000 each to make, and that's his whole thing. His rockets are much cheaper than NASA's rockets, and his cars are much cheaper than his competitors. That's his advantage. But his cars are so cheap that they're not safe, and they aren't certified to go much. They have to have a human, for safety in them right now. But certainly, he's got a point. I don't think they'll ever be economically viable if the cars are this expensive. They need to make the cars cheaper. All right. Well, that's enough of the news. I think I'll mention this one because it's so exciting, though. You may remember the Fantastic Voyage, where people ride a little tiny ship through the blood vessels. They've made chips that can ride on immune cells and then attach themselves to areas of inflammation. And they've got this working, so they say they can attack tumors that are inoperable because there's no way to get to them. And they can stimulate brain cells like the implants you use for Parkinson's and other diseases by sending these cells through your body that will find the area of interest and attach to it, and then you can power them with, I think, radio signals from the outside. So that's pretty exciting. You could probably use them to kill cancer. You could use them to stimulate things. It would probably be a whole new form of surgery. After they get these things going, of course, right now they had the first prototypes working in mice, so it would be probably decades before they really get it down to human use. But it is a new level of microscopic control over bodily functions that could have a whole lot of uses. So let me stop this.